What's going on, guys? Out on the brand new 2017 Ducati Scrambler Desert Sled. It's the one you've been reading about for the last 6-7 months. It's finally in the United States. So this review video would not be possible without Ducati Winchester loaning me out this brand new bike. So big thank you to those guys. They are not only your authorized Ducati dealer in Winchester, Virginia, they are also an official Ducati test facility, meaning you can stop in and ride this very Desert Sled or many of their other demo bikes. All you got to do is ask. Stop in, ask for Pete, or maybe Lauren, and tell them Mario sent you, and they're going to hook you up with a really fun test ride. Speaking of test rides, I gotta let you guys know what I think of the Desert Sled, so let's get to it. As usual, as I do with my review videos, we're gonna start out with the specs, so let's start out with the powertrain. The Desert Sled has an 803cc twin with desmodronic valves, 2 valves per cylinder. It is electronically fuel injected, but not ride-by-wire. You actually have a cable throttle over here. This engine is putting out 75 horsepower, 50 foot-pounds of torque, and you don't have to worry about a puncture in your radiator ruining your day if you're riding off-road, because it's got an air-cooled engine. The power is going to go back through a 6-speed transmission with a multi-wet plate clutch. It is cable actuated, as you can see over here, and all of that is going to a final drive that's chained because it's Ducati. Let's talk about the chassis for a moment. You do have a steel trellis frame and an aluminum swing arm. Up front for the suspension, you've got 46mm upside down forks. They are fully adjustable, albeit manually adjustable. This is not an electronic suspension on this bike. On the back, you have a Kayaba shock that is adjustable for preload and rebound only. Both of those are going to give you 7.9 inches of suspension travel. To get this bike slowed down, you've got Brembo components front and rear with stainless steel brake lines. On the front, you have a single 330mm disc with a 4-piston radial mount caliper. On the back, I believe it's a 260mm disc with a single piston floating caliper. Back up to the front, you have a 19-inch front wheel that is a spoked rim, and on the rear, we also have a spoked rim that is 17 inches in diameter. Wrapping those rims are Pirelli Scorpion Rally Star tires. If you've had a look at that tread pattern, you can tell they're not knobbies, but they're going to allow you to have plenty of fun off-road. Just a few other things. You do have a 3.57 gallon fuel tank on it, and with that tank full, as well as the oil and the rest of the fluids in the bike, this thing is going to tip the scales at about 456 pounds. The seat height is right around 33 inches, and with the way the seat is shaped, me being 5'10" with a 32-inch inseam, very, very easy reach to get my feet flat on the ground. Alright guys, now that you've heard the specs on the Desert Sled, we're going to head back to my garage for a few minutes so I can show you some of the features up close. First off, let's start out with the gauges. At a quick glance, this looks like an old school type gauge, and then you quickly realize that it's LCD. So we pop this on. Now the good part about it is you do have a very big miles per hour readout here. You got a little side stand indicator. You do have some idiot lights that go around through here. Let me see if I can get neutral. Neutral is also your typical green. Now if we look at this line right here, we do have some adjustments we can make, some different menus we can look at. That's the total mileage on the bike right now. You obviously have the clock above that. Hit the button, we can look at the 2 trip odometers. Then we've got outside air temperature, which seems to be a little off at the moment. And then we go back to total miles. Now to operate that gauge cluster, you're hitting this button right here. This button here is the horn. You get the turn signals here, push button cancellation. And then right here, I had some trouble with, this is your high-low beam. You push down. You can also tap it like this to flash it. Back to the gauge for just a moment. If you look right around here, you can see some numbers. You got 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. That is your tachometer, and as you rev up through, you'll see little LCD bars. I want to show you guys a little bit of a hidden menu here. If we press in on the bottom button over here for a few seconds, you can see we've got these different choices, and then we can use the top button and the bottom button to toggle through. If we want to choose something, we just push in on the turn signal cancel. So if like we want to see the battery right now, we can see it's at 12.8 volts. and then we can exit back out and we can continue to go around. We can adjust the brightness of the actual display itself. You can exit out of there. You can set your clock. You can anyway, you can set the ABS settings. Anyway, you have a few different things there. I just wanted to show you guys that. So this is just a small thing, but I've seen this on more and more Ducatis. I really like this feature. How many times you had your kill switch turned on so that the bike's off, and you hit the starter and nothing happens? In this case, when you kill it, you can't even hit the starter button, which I think is really cool, and I'd like to see more manufacturers go to this. Something they did to make the bike a little more off-road worthy, they put a headlight protector here on the front to keep you from bashing that in. Also, you can tell it's kind of off-road oriented because the fender is much higher above the wheel than it is on the other Scramblers. Something else they did, they added these front fork protectors to keep rocks from jumping up and hitting your upside down front fork, damaging the inner tube. And so we know it can handle some actual off-road duty. We've got a real bash plate underneath. You have an adjustable brake lever, no adjustment over here on the clutch lever. Now, one thing I like that they did, similar to the KTM 690 Enduro I was out on, they put these off-road style grips on, which on this side you can tell, this is the side where your palm's gonna go. No real ridges or anything. This side allows you to really grip the throttle or the other handlebar really, really well so your hand doesn't slip. So I like these grips. Now, if we take a look at this shock, this is not your traditionally mounted mono shock that goes right in the middle of the swing arm. This is actually a side mount. If we want to take the seat off, we're going to put the key in right here, give it a turn, and with that, the seat pops right off and we can see what we've got underneath here. Now, one thing you can't tell from the top is you can actually reach under here, under the seat. So if your passenger wanted to hold on to the subframe, that's an option, or they can hold on to you. So let's check out some things under the seat. First off, pretty easy access to the battery. Second, check this out. USB plug-in, so you can plug in your phone or other electronic devices to get those charging when you're going down the road. Pretty cool looking little Scrambler Ducati toolkit. Let's take a look, see what's inside. I think it's pretty cool how this thing kind of unrolls. We've got a few different tools in here. Nothing major, but some Allens, screwdriver. You do actually have the tool here you're going to need if you need to adjust the rear shock. We've got a few different things in here, and not bad for a toolkit. Put the seat back on. I just wanted to show you what the seat looks like. You can tell it does taper in quite a bit here, which will allow you to get your feet to the ground much easier. You do have some rubber inserts in the foot pegs that you can pop out if you wanted to wear more of a dirt oriented boot and really take this thing off-road. Spark plug on this cylinder head is super easy to get to. And if we look at the front cylinder, you can see that spark plug is really easy to get to as well. One last quick thing to show you here on the gas cap is the Born Free 1962 etched in there. I want to show you guys a couple of things this morning. One, you can kind of see what this bike looks like in the dark. It's not quite pitch dark yet, but still pretty low light. So there's your high beam, there's your low beam. The light does an okay job. Also, the other thing I want to show you, the idiot light for low fuel literally kicked on the second I started up the bike, and then it kind of starts you a little countdown there. I'll have to look in the manual, but my guess would be you probably get about a half a gallon of fuel as a warning. So I had about 7/10 of a gallon left in it after I ran it, probably about 2 miles after the low fuel light kicked on. So there's your update. All right, so what sets the Scrambler Desert Sled apart from the other Scramblers? Well, at first glance to the untrained eye, the first thing you may notice is the headlight protector and the fact that the front fender is much higher, kind of like a supermoto or true dirt bike front fender, and that's true. But what really sets us apart is a little bit harder to see. First off, the steel trellis frame has been reinforced to make it a little bit more rigid. Also, you got a little bit heavy-duty swing arm on the back that has been extended as well. When it comes to the suspension, you've got an extra 2 inches of travel over the basic Scramblers. And sticking with the suspension, you also have a beefier front fork on this model. In addition to the suspension, you may have noticed the wheels. It does come with wire wheels instead of cast wheels. So those are really the things that set this Scrambler apart from the other Scramblers. So what are my thoughts on this bike? Well, when I first saw that it was 75 horsepower and 456 pounds wet, I didn't think those numbers were very impressive. And to be honest, they're not impressive at all. Which, after riding this bike, after riding this bike for the last few days, I've come to the conclusion that when it comes to this motorcycle, numbers mean nothing. This bike is an absolute hoot to ride. It's one of those bikes, it's just so basic. It's just your basic motorcycle. And it's one of those things, it's just a blast to ride. And it's so easy to hop on and just take off on it. It does what you expect it to do. It's just, I don't know how many times I can say it. It's just fun. It's one of those things. I rode to work this morning in the rain, knowing that it was raining outside, and I smiled the entire way. Now, if that doesn't tell you how much fun this thing is to ride, I don't know what will. But I guess I need to get a little more specific on what makes it fun. 75 horsepower is not a ton in today's day and age, but it's plenty when it comes to this bike. The first thing you're going to notice when you pull the clutch in, it is an extremely easy pull. It's also very easy to take off in first and then shift this thing up and back down through the gear pattern. Just super simple. Now, the first Ducati I ever owned was a 2002 Monster 620 Dark, and the fuel injection on it was okay, but you know, 15 years ago it wasn't quite what it is today, and it is just silky smooth from takeoff all the way up through. I really like the suspension on this bike. You can throw this thing into a corner. I've got total confidence in both the suspension staying planted. There's no, even if you've got a interruption mid-corner or something, it soaks it right up, no problem. Tires do a good job on the road. I've still got to test them out off the road. We'll get to that section here in a little bit. But no surprise in the suspension. Love that you got a fully adjustable front fork. Also love that you can adjust the rear shock on it as well. It also helps when throwing in corners, have this nice wide handlebar as opposed to some clip-ons or something like that. Really makes it easier to maneuver. Ergonomically, I don't know that you can get a whole lot more comfortable seating position in this motorcycle. It's a pretty upright seating position. You're leaned forward just a little bit, which is actually good in this case. You don't get a sore lower back. You've got just enough wind coming back because you obviously don't have much wind protection. And it's just enough to keep you comfortable. You got enough wind to keep you upright in really, really comfortable position that you can pretty much sit in all day long. The brakes on it, the brakes do a really, really good job of bringing this thing to a stop, but also they do a really good job of setting you up for the corners. I do have one gripe with the rear brake, which I'll talk about when I get to the section of things I don't like about the bike. So my overall impression, at least on road, is a comfortable bike that handles well with enough horsepower to keep you out of trouble, but not too much to get you into too much trouble, if that makes sense. All right, so now that you've heard my thoughts on what I think of this as a motorcycle, at least as an on-road bike, let me give you a few gripes I've got right off the bat. Gripe number one. I showed you guys the menu and how you can toggle through the screens and everything on the gauge cluster. My problem is it's tough to get to the button in order to toggle around without hitting the horn button or the turn signal indicator or a number of other things over here. It's just kind of clunky the way it was designed. I would have liked to have seen a button placed somewhere else and gotten these three buttons away from each other because it's really difficult to operate. Another thing I don't like, and I'm going to stick with the gauges for a second, it's awfully difficult to read the RPM gauge if you're going at any sort of speed. It's just not easy to see. While I do like the handlebar and the fact that I can stand up off-road and it's an easy reach to the handlebar, it would have been nice to see them put a little bit beefier type bar on there, like something like Renthal makes, almost more like a dirt bike handlebar. I think it just would have felt a little bit better in my hand and just would have fed into the look of the bike just a little bit more. While not a major gripe, I'm still kind of split on this next thing, the seat. The seat's not bad. And I say that because I can ride it for about an hour and a half or so before, you know, my butt starts to get fatigued just a little bit. So it's tough to nitpick on a bike like this. I don't know how many people are really going to go out and ride for 2-3 hours in a stretch without taking a break. And once you're off of it for 5 minutes and hop back on, it's fine again. One other quick thing that I found just slightly irritating was the ABS was kicking on the rear brake. It's a little bit more intrusive than I wanted it to be. I'm not sure if that's something that can be adjusted or not, but just something to be aware of. And the last big negative about the Desert Sled isn't really its fault. It's the fault of hipsters, because the entire Scrambler lineup has become known as a hipster bike. Now, if you're not wearing the goggles with the 3/4 helmet and the brown leather jacket, you might be okay. They might not mistake you for one. But even if they do, you're not going to care, because you're going to be smiling, because you're going to be having so much fun riding this thing. Alright guys, so I took Noah out on a ride earlier today, about 50 miles, and he absolutely loved riding on the back. But then again, he's 7, and he loves just about every motorcycle he's been on. So as usual, I was able to talk Kristen in to hopping on the back of this thing to give you the passenger's perspective. So we're going to cut over to her right now, and you can hear her thoughts.
So my thoughts on the Desert Sled as a passenger is I didn't like this bike. I loved this bike. Super comfortable, all around great fit. Typically I'm one to want a backrest on longer rides, but I could have easily stayed on another hour or two and been just as comfortable. I like the sound of it. I like the look of it. The only part that's disappointing is that we don't have one sitting in the garage right now.
So unfortunately here in West Virginia, aside from the local park sand volleyball court, I don't have anything that resembles a desert, but I still wanted to get the Desert Sled off-road. So fortunately, I was able to take it off-road through some fields, took it off-road through some orchards, also took it down that back mountain road that is barely maintained at all. It's basically dirt and a little bit of gravel that I took the 690 Enduro R down. And then I tried it out on my own trails there at the house. So how did it do? Well, first off, we need to keep in mind, this is not a dirt bike made for the street. This is a street bike that has been beefed up a little bit to ride off-road. That said, I was thoroughly impressed with what it did down the back mountain road, which is, like I said, just a barely maintained dirt road. We even rode that 2-up with Kristen on the back, and to be honest, I was confident in the tires and the suspension and the entire package the entire time. Even with her on the back, she was fairly comfortable. It soaked up the bumps pretty well. We got to some ruts and washout spots, handled them without any problems. On the field, once again, I was a little scared because I saw some rock breaks, and this is not my bike, but it did a great job. I stood up on the pegs, took it right through that field. It took everything extremely well. Through the orchard, also a lot of fun. The only spot where it fell short, and I'm going to put this more so on the tires than the bike itself, was on the trails. That said, it did rain yesterday, so it was a little muddy. It was pretty slippery, and it was even tough to kind of walk on. So to expect this bike to do a whole lot on some muddy trails with the types of tires that are on it is probably asking a little too much. But for a street bike, I was impressed. If you're going to take this thing through the desert, I can only speculate, but I think it would do a damn good job. For most owners, I think you're probably going to do what I did, and of the few hundred miles I rode this thing, almost all of them were on-road, and about 15 miles were off-road. So if you're planning on hitting up some fire roads and some dirt roads and stuff like that, I think you're going to be thoroughly impressed by it. If you're planning on going trail riding, you probably want to look elsewhere. Alright guys, so to me, Ducati's hit the mark with the Scrambler Desert Sled. This is a bike that, you know, the numbers aren't going to blow you away, but it handles well, great brakes, enough power to have some fun, and it looks cool as hell. And the biggest thing is, it's so much fun. And to put the fun in numbers, I have racked up more miles on this test bike than I have any other test bike that I've reviewed on my channel, and it's not even close. And I'm still going to put about another 80 or 90 on it before I take it back to the dealer today to finally get my bike out of the back. Once again, big thank you to the guys up at Ducati Winchester for allowing me to take this bike out for multiple days. It's been a blast. Alright guys, so I hope you enjoyed today's review video and got a lot of good information from it. If you did, please give me a big thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, be sure to hit that subscribe button. We're going to have more reviews coming up on the channel. And be sure to check out some of my other videos as well. If there's something I didn't answer or another question you may have about the bike, be sure to ask it below, and I'll be checking into those comments to try to answer them as best I can. And as always, I'll talk to you again soon.